Hey everybody, I am going to be drawing this bottle, and you can't see it on the screen, but it's there'll be a photograph available for you of this white bottle for you to practice one of the exercises at home. So what I wanted to show you here was one working with your willow charcoal as opposed to your basic, number 2 charcoal pencil to get your basic envelope and the initial drawing done. I also wanted to show you in this video, I'm going to try to keep this one short. I'm going to set my timer here so that we can get moving on to some other things. Essentially, once we get done with this demo, it's just kind of showing you how to start using this, and then a method to start without starting with too much line, the subtraction method. So I'm going to show you both of those, and mostly what I want to show you is how little you actually need to have in your initial drawing before you start applying value. Again, just like with the sphere demo, this is very malleable, clay-like approach where you push and pull really easy. So spending a lot of time on an initial linear drawing with too much detail and too much information just keeps you from mixing the background with the object. You tend to stop at the line and everything feels really sharp in an unhelpful way. You also end up wasting a lot of time just because you're going to be covering all of that line up anyway. So it's best just to get used to being able to shift things on the fly. So what I'm going to start with here is going to be using holding my willow charcoal just like we are when we're doing value marks on its side, but focused on doing a nice line. Like I said in the sphere drawing, because it's a greater surface area, you can get straighter lines a lot easier. If you have a hard time holding the charcoal in this manner initially, or if you really enjoy the charcoal pencil approach just because it feels more natural, you can sharpen one of your really thin willow charcoals using your sandpaper block to a nice point and do your line work that way as well, your initial light line of the drawing of your object before you start knocking in the value. It's up to you. You could play with both, see what you think. Top of our bottle. It's not a great habit to get in measuring with the side of your charcoal like that, but it definitely works. You can also use your pencil to get your basic envelope. Wide. No. Let me put in the top notch of the bottle, and before I go much further, I'm just going to do a quick I wouldn't even worry too much. I know initially people get pretty caught up on the symmetry, and I think like right now mine's kind of leaning a little bit that way. There's plenty of time to kind of adjust things. So like for instance, this goes that way a little bit more. but it's easier to do with the value later. So just focus on, mostly at this stage, getting your proportions of your bottle. I'm just going to lightly throw that in. So I'm kind of just breaking this envelope down just a little bit more. And measuring some of my corners. All right, so let's do just a quick check on our proportions. Because that's the main thing, is just getting your basic proportions, all the little curves and stuff, and getting it to line up on both sides. That can all be done once you get going with the value, and it's actually easier to do with value. And like I said, it's kind of a waste of time to do otherwise. So we got 1, 2, 3, 3 3/4. So roughly there. 1, 2, 3 3/4. Pretty close. So I don't want to get super nitpicky on it. Like I said, jumping into the value is going to be a faster and easier way to do it. So once you have your basic proportions, you can kind of start looking. So one thing I'm going to do is, I noticed that 1, 2, right about here should be where that shadow kicks in this way, is right about there. The reason I'm going to snag that now is I just noticed it when I was doing my measurements. So remember from when we were talking about measuring, that it is good if you notice something that's going to be helpful. If it lands on a good landmark, one of your 1s or 2, your segment, make note of it, or document it on the drawing real quick, or make a mental note to remember that that lined up that way. I'm going to just kind of square it up. And now I am roughly just laying in a light line for where my form shadow lives, and paying attention to how far is that point to this point, this point related to that, and just kind of looking at their basic angles and relationships, just real rough, and then it kind of goes this way. I think this needs to get a little bigger. Cool. So that's about as far as you need to go with your initial drawing. I'm not going to even erase that stuff. And I'm just going to do a few more minutes of just kind of knocking it in. Using my left hand, I'm getting a little exaggerated on that bump. That's fine. Just use your finger or your paper towel or eraser and kind of squish it back out. Cool. So then I knock in my form shadow, and I'm going to move kind of quick here. Got a lot of other videos to record tonight. I've been trying to get as many of these in quickly instead of pacing it out over doing them all in one shot here so that just in case I lose access to the studio for coronavirus reasons, you have some videos to work with for your assignments. Also helps me to just kind of keep things coordinated in my head about where we are together. Let's see here. So I'm just kind of shifting a little bit, but I'm going to stop here pretty quick because I want to demo the other approach, working with subtraction. Really just jumping right in with that value is a great thing to do because you're saving yourself a lot of time in the long run. And like I said, with working via subtraction, when we were working on that sphere drawing, is that you're immediately getting rid of the line and allowing yourself to create that form faster by killing any line. So although still slightly crooked, it is, from there I'd start knocking in my values, looking at light side, dark side, just like the sphere, and start building my form. So let's go ahead and get a new page. Right, so essentially the same process. Once again, get a new charcoal chunk. I'll try a fat one. This is one of the big ones here. Oh. Nice and flat. I don't know if I'm gonna like this one. I don't think I like it. I'll use it for a little bit. All right, cool. So just kind of getting that top indicator of where this is really dry. over a little bit, kind of off center. I do think it's easier sometimes to use your other hand, which you have a little practice in when you're trying to get symmetry, because you can see the other side that you're attempting to mirror. And again, I'm not worried about coming inside the form, because I'm going to smudge all this out anyway. I'm really just trying to, I'm getting a little overly obsessed about this outside here, so I'm going to jump to quickly check my proportions and see how they're looking. So we say 3 3/4. We got 1, 2, 3 3/4. Pretty close. I think that somewhere in here my neck is maybe just a little too long. We'll see though as we start building more form. So it's a little more symmetrical than the last one. And now I'm just going to start looking for my shadow form. My form shadow. This way. What's great about this abstraction too is you really are kind of relying on a lot of the skill sets, which is why I try to keep them separate when we're practicing in class. But this is essentially what I'm doing right now is contouring, continuous line contouring to subtract out that edge of the bottle. So it's a skill you already have. To subtract, you're just pushing a little bit harder on that inside point as you do it to get a nice clean edge. And right now I'm still not really worried about the direction of my marks as far as pulling out this way. It's not a big deal. I'm doing so much adjusting as I go. And as I'm doing this, I want to be thinking about my terminator and my qualities of my edges, my form shadow, just being soft and its distance from here to here. The shadow, the light side's wider than the shadowed side. I'm thinking about these things as I'm going. I might switch to a different charcoal that's a little bit less dry here in a second. The other thing I want to do is start looking at the light side and determine where the light's hitting, where the white is the strongest. And I'm seeing the light and the white being the strongest roughly like right here. So as it's going from a little bit of dark on the edge to mostly light inside, so getting lighter as it's going this way, and then as it goes this way, it's getting going into the dark, obviously. And then as the white is going up, it's getting darker. So I know that all of this here can be pushed back as I'm marking to kind of help me to start seeing the form a little bit better. And what's nice about that, just due to if you look at the photo and you squint, the shadowed side is also getting darker as it's going up, and that terminator is getting darker as it's going up. So the darker this gets here, relatively speaking, I'm expanding my value range so that I could push this darker and still have it feel like a shadow side and a light side of a white object. And then that also allows me to pull out my highlights, which I'll do here in a second. But I want to think about form as I'm going and planes. So what's an upward facing plane hitting the light more? what's a downward facing plane, upward facing plane, slight downward facing plane right along that ridge. So as I'm going, I can lightly mark in upward, downward planes and think about that as I'm going. And like I said, with the sphere, a lot of this is so that you can start seeing the form. We're going to smooth it out and lose a lot of this, right? But it helps you to start seeing the form better. That time, I'm going to go just a little bit longer here and start kind of getting a little bit more. Kind of pinches in and pulls out. This might be up a little higher. It's going to come out a little higher too. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and use my finger for the sake of time and kind of smooth some things out. You can see how quick, I was able to, in 10 minutes I got a lot further. I did both in 10 minutes. Got a lot further working this way. As far as seeing the form, getting a lot of things established, I'll go ahead and smooth that whole thing back into the dark and lock in some more value. There's a little crisp edge. I'll push this pretty dark and squint and look just to compare to the background. So I'm comparing this dark to my dark of the background to make sure I don't relatively start occupying that space. I'm going to switch to one that can get darker, a little less dry. Push that a little bit more out. Cool. All right, let's push our dark right there. I'm also noticing that the reflective light gets lighter down here than up here. Let my initial marks make note of that, and I'm going to give a little bit of extra dark on that edge there, so when I smooth it out it'll be a little bit darker on the edge as it goes back, and then there's kind of a nice bit of extra dark there. As it rolls down and under, it gets a little darker. It's getting a little darker on that edge, and a little darker in there, and a little darker there. Cool. So remember, we want to build the form and then you erase the light, but in general we know that this is all going to be fairly dark, because if we look at those highlights, those are pretty juicy highlights, and we know that's the white of the paper is reserved for those highlights. And so we want to push the white, the light side of the white of the bottle darker than you might initially think, because you're like, oh, it's a white bottle, it's all going to be in light. But in order to get those highlights to pop, we need to push the lights darker so that we can get them to start to pop out. So I'm gonna grab my eraser. I'm gonna do a couple things here. I'm just going to sharpen the edge of my cast shadow, and I'm not doing a ton of measuring, just for the sake of time here. I just more showing you technique. You still want to apply all the measuring techniques that we've been doing along the way. So you can use the corner of the bottle to check where these breaks are in your form shadow. I was using this corner of the bottle to line up with that slope of the shoulder. That was one that my eye kind of caught right off the bat, which was has been helpful to line things up. And I'm just kind of fine-tuning my edge there. I can't have that light right on that edge in the end, but I can use it right now to kind of help see my bottle. And I'm going to keep sharpening my form shadow. It's a little softer down here. And then right here we have a nice little kick in along that ridge. It's catching a little bit of light right here. I'm just going to lightly put that in. And then I'm going to clean this up here too. So there's a little bit of a light rim. It's getting lighter on this side, closest to the light, and going to the dark. And push it back actually. First we're going to, before I get into that too much, I'm going to push this over. It's more narrow, and then it goes this way. And it comes straight, almost, and then in. So just thinking about the planes as they roll across. That cuts pretty hard. I need to pull that more that way. So I'm looking at that negative shape, just that shadow shape size, and it made me see that that could be pushed over more, so that it was wide enough that this could come out at the steep angle that it is, and then from there it's coming down. And over. This way. And that way. And there, we just have to get light. So let's put these highlights in. So if you look at the highlights, they're right along this ridge, and this needs to be wider. So you want to constantly be adjusting as you go, just like with all of our work so far. We're always improving the drawing as we move along, the proportions and the basic shapes and stuff. Nothing is perfect until the end when we can no longer work on it. I'm going to push that out too. So I got my highlight there, and then at an angle like this, right there, and another highlight right along there, and then there's a linear highlight that kind of starts straight, and then it goes this way, paralleling the outside, but just slightly more straight up and down, right? So this is steeper, and then as it's moving in, it's getting, the planes are getting less steep, more straight up and down, or more steep, less towards the horizontal. And that needs to come out wider still. So I'm just putting these in, one to help me see the form, but two, it's going to help me with my values of how dark and light I need to go. And then there's this nice kind of juicy one up there. But when I squint and I look at just the highlights, you can see that this is the brightest. That's the second brightest, which might need to be down a little bit. And then this one is darker than this one. And then this one is brighter than these two, but not as bright as this one. So that's kind of my hierarchy, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, but that'd be my basic relativity relationship of highlights to one another. And what that does is, by this being brighter, it'll pull this in front of this plane or group. This part of the bottle will pull in front of this part, and then this part up here will start to recede back in space if this gets darker than this one and this one. And then this one will read as closer to the light and brighter, also because the white right around it is going to be darker than the whites that are around these, right? So as it's going up, it's getting darker. So it'll feel lighter, but as we get going, it might just look lighter based on the darks that are around it, but actually be lighter. So we will find out as we go here. So I'm going to push this darker right now a little bit so I can see. Notice I'm really not worrying about that edge too much. I'm just looking at the form and the relationships of things to one another. So the top of the bottle is there. I'm kind of subtracting out that top by using the darks around it. Do some smoothing. And on the shadow side too. Kill some of the white right next to this. I'm not going to go all the way just for the sake of time, but just so we can start seeing the internal value a little bit more. And I'm just going to play with an eraser a little bit. There's a couple things I wanted to show you that I didn't get a chance to, based on the light in the sphere. It's easier to see here. This This is all quite a bit darker than it needs to be. I haven't started applying light yet. And I will write, after I do one more mark here. There's a rhythm of coming off the neck of this bottle that when it rolls down, it catches the angle of that shadow that's swooping across there. Try to keep that intact. It's a nice quality of the bottle. Just going to push my terminator a little bit more. And I'll get a little value next to it so it has a good transition into the light, and then that transition swoops more this way. Alright, so let's look at bringing some light in and pushing things back out. New chunk, there we go. So if we look on this side of the bottle, there is, in general, this is going to get, maybe a little bit lighter, not too much. I'm just going to kind of drag this through so I can start seeing that. It's getting lighter, and it's fairly light here too. But notice like there's some reflective light in here. Sometimes you'll get this weird like transition where it goes dark, 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 and then it goes into the light, and the form doesn't feel like it's connecting all the way across. So what I like to do is I just come through and drag through where I see the strongest reflective light happening. There's a really strong one there, and I'll drag through my form shadow, and you can see right there, you actually see that terminator gets a little bit lighter along that ridge. So you see how that starts to make the form feel like it's rolling all the way across from light side to dark side, and this needs to get lighter anyway. So I'm going to drag that through, and then it gets real light down here, and it breaks through right here. So this would be kind of, I'm being slightly gestural, but this would be nice kind of planar marking. You're looking at planar organization as you're dragging through. Like it's pretty light, and the shadow is going to get quite a bit darker. So I'm not going to push it too light, but just going to, this is all an upward facing plane. And then what I can do is then I can drag my terminator and my shadow back over the top, and it starts to feel more connected marks wise. So that's really the main thing I wanted to show you. And I was moving pretty quick there, so you can go a little slower if you want, and be a little bit more accurate than your teacher. Right. So off that point, this comes down. I'm just going to work here for a few more minutes. If it starts to get too sloppy, I just spend a little bit of time cleaning up any weird fingerprints or things that were distracting from the form too much, and then I'll jump back in and start organizing all of that again. And your kneaded eraser is great to kind of get back in there too and soften up stuff. It's looking too jumpy. That shadow edge got kind of lost, so I'm going to clean that up. If I go a little lighter than it should be, that's okay, because I can come back in and knock it back. So you kind of focus on different things at different times. Brightest down here. Cool. Don't want to go too much further because I have other demos that want to show you different stuff that this will start getting into. But we can real quick. Sorry, now I'm just getting into the drawing. I'm gonna let go. All right, simplify. Bow up because we're looking from below. Let's let bow to it. There. Anyway, so I just wanted to show you push and pull, how to start, something other than a sphere, and how to think about the light as it relates to the highlights. You can put these in a little bit brighter, so that's like right in the middle of that crease. And this one. So what you can do is you can put them in kind of all at the same brightness, and then worry about their exact shape and quality or brightness after you've kind of, as you're working, I can drag over until I kind of push that back. And I'm going to let this get a little darker right below it, make it feel brighter. And this guy's got quite a bit of dark around it, so I can shape it with my finger and push a little bit of dark right next to it. To kind of see things better. And this one can get pushed back. I'm getting distracted. Cool. So that's a real quick and dirty version of a start. All right, I'll see you on the next video. Hope everybody's doing all right. We just got our first case here in Juneau, so hopefully it's nobody that you guys know, or just wish them luck. Be safe, and see ya on the next video. All right.